Did you forget the cardinal rule? Exes are supposed to be like, well, dead? The icy voice crackled over the phone line, sending a shiver down my spine. I stammered an apology, instantly regretting my ghostly resurrection. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. But I really need to speak to your father. Silence. Then, a drawn-out, exasperated sigh. Seriously? 7 years. 7 years had passed, and honestly, a reunion with my ex was the last thing I'd envisioned. Yet, here we were, on the precipice of something. When we finally met face to face, Jasper leaned back in his leather office chair, a smirk playing on his lips. Looking a bit worse for wear, Raven. Dark circles under your eyes could rival a raccoon's. Seems life outside my orbit hasn't exactly been kind, has it? He practically purred, a smug satisfaction radiating from him. Some people, honestly. Perfectly decent human beings, utterly ruined by the unfortunate addition of a mouth. After 7 years of radio silence, couldn't he at least offer a semblance of compassion? My fists clenched instinctively, then slowly unfurled. Right. I needed something from him. Patience, Raven, patience. Just give me your father's number, Jasper. The quicker I got it, the quicker I could be rid of him. And why, pray tell, do you require my father's direct line? He leaned forward, elbows on the mahogany desk, steepled fingers forming a barrier between us. The familiar intensity in his gaze, the subtle pressure. It all rushed back, a ghost of intimidation from my younger years. Back then, through my adolescence and high school years, Jasper had been an untouchable figure, a distant, almost mythical high mountain flower, as the saying goes. My feelings for him were a complex cocktail of infatuation and, dare I admit it, a strange sort of reverence. Yes, reverence. Like admiring a distant, powerful deity. I instinctively recoiled in my chair, that old habit kicking in, then caught myself. He wasn't my anything anymore. No need to revert to those old, subservient patterns. Straightening my spine, I met his gaze head-on. It's personal. Something I need to discuss with him directly. He narrowed his eyes, a flicker of amusement dancing in their depths. Then, a slow curve of his lips, a gesture I remembered all too well. He reached into his impeccably tailored suit jacket, producing a business card. He placed it on the polished desk, sliding it towards me with a flick of his wrist. Allow me to reintroduce myself, Raven. The name's Jasper Sterling. And currently, I'm Mr. Sterling Sr.'s legal representative. My jaw went slack. My eyes darted to the card, the embossed gold lettering gleaming under the soft office lighting. Sterling and Blackwood Legal Partners, Jasper Sterling, senior partner and attorney at law. What the? Wasn't this guy supposed to be a finance was back in college? When had he pivoted to law? And become a senior partner? A seasoned attorney? Perhaps my bewildered stare was a little too obvious, a silent interrogation beam. Jasper sighed, a theatrical sound of long-suffering patience. Yes, Raven, it's real. As genuine as the day is long. Now, perhaps you can enlighten me as to why you're seeking out Sterling Sr.? The words caught in my throat. How could I possibly articulate this mess? So, Jasper, I started, then faltered. It's about your father. Brilliant, Raven. Oscar-worthy delivery. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. Taking a deep breath, I plunged in. It's about, well, your father's second wife. The one after your mother. I cringed inwardly at my clumsy phrasing. Jasper's expression remained impassive, but I could see a flicker of something, curiosity? Apprehension? In his eyes. And, he prompted, the single word hanging in the air. She's, kind of, seeing my husband. The words tumbled out, a messy, undignified confession. Silence descended again, thicker this time, heavier. I braced myself for a barrage of questions, disbelief, maybe even laughter. Instead, Jasper just stared at me, his gaze unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and measured. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Raven. Are you telling me that Vivian, my stepmother, is involved in an inappropriate relationship with your husband? Involved? Jasper, they are practically staging a soap opera in my living room. The frustration, the humiliation, the sheer absurdity of it all bubbled to the surface. I overheard them. Explicitly. Heard her calling him pet names, talking about. I trailed off, unable to repeat the salacious details. Jasper leaned back again, running a hand through his dark hair. He looked thoughtful, almost professionally detached. And what exactly do you intend to do with this information, Raven? Are you looking for legal counsel? Emotional support? Or perhaps, something else? Something else, I echoed, a sudden surge of anger hardening my resolve. Definitely something else. Bartender. Bring us a bottle. I signaled to the waiter, needing liquid courage, and fast. Alcohol, the great emboldener. The whole sordid saga had started a few days prior. I'd taken a half day from work, a searing stomach ache sending me fleeing home for the sanctuary of my bed. Rest and quiet, that was the prescription. Instead, I stumbled headfirst into a reality show I never auditioned for, a live performance that shattered my world. The sound of keys jingling in the lock, the click of the front door opening, then closing. Familiar sounds, yet on this particular afternoon, they heralded something sinister. A woman's voice, vaguely familiar, drifted through the slightly ajar bedroom door. "Darling, Aunt Vivian brought you a little something." The voice was smooth, honeyed, with an undercurrent of something predatory. "Some Gucci briefs. Come on, let's see if they fit." "Aunt Vivian, you shouldn't have." Brian's voice, laced with a sickeningly sweet tone I rarely heard, a forced, childish gratitude. "Anything Aunt Vivian picks always fits perfectly." "Well, hurry up then, let's have a look." Aunt Vivian." Then came the sounds. The soft rustle of clothing, followed by a series of increasingly suggestive moans and gasps. Indecipherable murmurs escalating into breathless sighs. A shiver of disgust crawled up my spine. My stomach churned, the earlier pain replaced by a cold, nauseating dread. After what felt like an eternity of muffled sounds and suggestive noises, Vivian's voice, now huskier, breathy, cut through the silence. "Let's go to my place, darling." But why not here?" "I can't wait, Vivian." Brian's voice was strained, urgent. "No, darling, not here. Your wife might come home any minute." The hurried footsteps, the click of the bedroom door closing, then the echoing slam of the front door as they left, their illicit rendezvous abruptly shifting location. Bang. The sound reverberated through the apartment, but it wasn't the door. It was the sound of my carefully constructed world imploding, my carefully curated reality shattering into a million jagged pieces. My husband. Brian. And his Aunt Vivian? Brian had introduced Vivian months ago, painting her as a benevolent mentor, a crucial figure in his career trajectory. My lucky charm, he'd called her, explaining how she'd smoothed the path for his latest project. Aunt Vivian. I'd even felt a pang of gratitude towards her, a respectful warmth. We'd had dinner, polite conversation, nothing untoward. Aunt. Now, the word tasted like ash in my mouth. My eyes widened, pupils dilating in disbelief. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of panic and betrayal. My teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached, yet my body trembled uncontrollably, all strength leaching away, leaving me hollowed out, plummeting into a chasm of despair. This man, Brian, who had swept me off my feet after my return from overseas, claiming he'd fallen instantly for me, vowing to wait patiently while I healed from past heartaches, promising to love, cherish, and protect me for eternity. Just 2 years into our marriage, and he was slipping into Gucci briefs bought by another woman? A woman old enough to be his mother? Rage, molten and furious, began to simmer within me. I should have stormed out there, ripped them both apart, verbally eviscerated them, screamed until my lungs gave out. Who do you think you are? What kind of vile creatures are you? But in the immediate aftermath of such a brutal, unexpected blow, my body had short-circuited. Instead of rage, I was paralyzed, a numb, disoriented void. In the days that followed, I retreated into a self-imposed exile, escaping the apartment before dawn, returning long after nightfall, a ghost in my own home, meticulously avoiding any contact with Brian. Then, one night, sleep eluded me. Staring at the ceiling, mind racing, I heard him. His voice, low and conspiratorial, drifted from the living room, where he'd retreated to take a call. "My wife's been acting strangely lately. You need to be careful too, Vivian. Don't let Sterling Sr. suspect a thing. Sterling Sr. A perfectly ordinary, paternal-sounding name. But a jolt of recognition, sharp and electric, shot through me. Sterling. Jasper Sterling. Jasper. Sterling. Song Yuan. Song Jianhua. During our heady, youthful romance, we'd traded childhood anecdotes, family histories, home addresses, parents' names. Silly, inconsequential details at the time, now suddenly loaded with significance. My dad's name is Jianhua, he declared proudly. Yours is Aigua? We're practically soulmates, Raven. Don't get ahead of yourself, Romeo, I teased back. In that era, half the dads were named Jianhua, Jianyi, Aigua, Aimin. It's not exactly unique. But Sterling. And the nagging sense of familiarity I'd felt when I met Vivian, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Could it really be? Driven by a desperate, almost morbid curiosity, I'd dialed Jasper's number. A number I hadn't touched in 7 years. Miraculously, it still worked. And now, here we were, tangled in a web of betrayal and bizarre coincidence, linked by a shared enemy, a shared pain. And a shared past. This is unbelievable, I murmured, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. Unbelievably messy, Jasper corrected, taking a long sip of his own drink, a dark, brooding scotch. As the alcohol loosened my tongue and dulled the edges of my pain, the dam within me finally cracked. Tears welled up, blurring my vision, then spilled over, tracing hot paths down my cheeks. The carefully constructed walls around my emotions crumbled, and a torrent of grief, anger, humiliation, and utter bewilderment poured forth. I sobbed, I choked, I rambled, a disjointed, tear-soaked monologue of heartbreak and betrayal. Snot and tears flowed freely, liberally coating Jasper's pristine white shirt as I leaned on him for support, a sobbing, incoherent mess. And then? Darkness. Oblivion. Blackout. I woke to blinding sunlight streaming through sheer white curtains. A plush, unfamiliar bed beneath me, crisp white sheets, the faint, lingering scent of expensive hotel soap. And beside me, sprawled out in a decidedly unromantic, starfish position, snoring softly. My best friend, Willow. Willow? Willow? Panic flared. Wait, wasn't I just drinking with Jasper? Where was Jasper? Just then, the door swung open, and Jasper entered, a gust of cool morning air preceding him, carrying a bag from a familiar bakery. Breakfast. Willow, with the speed and agility of a seasoned ninja, grabbed 2 steaming buns from the bag, mumbled a hasty morning, and practically teleported out of the room, slamming the door shut behind her. In the fleeting moment before she disappeared, she shot me a knowing wink, a mischievous grin, a nudge-nudge wink-wink that screamed, "Don't worry, I'm leaving you 2 lovebirds to it." Willow, no. I wanted to shout. I'm a married woman. This is not some romantic rendezvous. Her assumptions, her well-meaning but utterly misguided matchmaking attempt, felt both hilariously inappropriate and morally reprehensible. Jasper, oblivious to Willow's dramatic exit and her romantic interpretations, settled into a chair, utterly unfazed, radiating lawyerly composure. So, he began, his voice crisp and businesslike, to recap. You want to expose them? Catch them in the act, so to speak? The bite of the warm bun lodged in my throat, momentarily choking me. I nodded, finally managing to swallow. Yes. The word was barely a whisper, but the conviction behind it was steel strong. I want to make them pay. Isn't that how it always played out in the dramas? Person A's spouse B cheats with person C's spouse D. A and C, united by betrayal, discover the truth, bond over their shared pain, and then, well, in the cheesy versions, A and C fall madly in love and ride off into the sunset. Nope, scratch that last bit, I corrected myself mentally. This wasn't a rom-com, this was real life. This was messy, painful, and decidedly unromantic. The revised ending, A and C, united in righteous fury, expose B and D, dismantle their deceitful scheme, and then, part ways, wiser and wearier, back to the vast, indifferent ocean of humanity. Life, after all, had to go on. Even if it was a colossal, steaming pile of, well, you get the picture. All right, Jasper said, his gaze sharp and focused. Then we need evidence. Do you have any? He was all business now, the lawyer in full swing. Gone was the smug ex-boyfriend, replaced by a pragmatic, analytical professional. I heard them, I stammered, feeling foolishly inadequate. Isn't my testimony enough? I heard the whole thing. Except for the drive to her place. If it weren't for internet censorship, I probably could have heard that too, I thought wryly. Jasper actually chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Raven, darling, you haven't grown a brain cell in all these years, have you? He had no idea. He had absolutely no clue about the financial carnage Brian had inflicted, the elaborate scam he'd pulled with my savings. The phantom friends and relatives, the fabricated emergencies, the sob stories. That had drained my bank account. Over $30,000 vanished into thin air, lent out on nothing but empty promises and manipulative lies. No loan agreements, no IOUs, just my blind trust and his calculated deceit. As I mumbled the details of the missing money, the non-existent paperwork, Jasper's face darkened. His jaw tightened, and a muscle twitched in his cheek. Listen to me, Raven, he said, his voice suddenly serious, devoid of any trace of amusement. First thing we do, you go to a clinic. Get a full panel. Every STI test imaginable. He stood abruptly. Come on. Let's go. Now. My eyes scanned the room, landing on my pathetic, $100 knockoff backpack from some online discount site. I fumbled inside, pulling out a folded piece of paper. A lab report. A gynecological exam. I handed it to him. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the medical jargon. A sigh of relief escaped his lips. Well, he said, a hint of grudging admiration in his voice. For once, you actually did something smart. Oh, bite me, I thought, resisting the urge to retort with something equally sarcastic. Mr. Smarty Pants, lawyer. But I bit my tongue. He was helping me, after all. And truthfully, was I really that dense? No. Not entirely. The moment they left, the moment the full weight of their betrayal crashed down, I'd stumbled out of the apartment, a wounded animal seeking refuge, and headed straight to the nearest clinic. Driven by a primal fear, a desperate need for self-preservation. Thankfully, I'd dodged that particular bullet. Clean bill of health. A small victory in a sea of devastation. But then, a cunning little seed of self-preservation had sprouted within me. I'd requested a second copy of the report. A slightly modified version. This one, the one I'd shown Jasper, contained a subtly altered diagnosis. Medical jargon that would make most laypeople's eyes glaze over. But the gist, the crucial, strategically crafted sentence, was crystal clear. Patient exhibits signs of gynecological inflammation. Prescription medication administered. Recommend temporary abstinence from sexual activity during treatment. Temporary abstinence. Emphasis on temporary. And most importantly, doctor's orders. Next step, Jasper said, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light. We get irrefutable proof of his infidelity. We document everything. Every lie, every deception, every sordid detail. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Anyone who dares to mess with someone I care about, is going to pay. Dearly. My heart skipped a beat. Someone he cares about? Was he talking about his father? Or, was he, possibly, maybe, just a tiny, minuscule bit, referring to me? My former, long-lost self? I lowered my gaze, unable to meet his intense stare. The question hung unspoken in the air, a fragile, tantalizing possibility. Back at the apartment, I set the stage. Candlelight dinner for two. Soft music. The works. A meticulously crafted illusion of romantic normalcy. Even I had to admit, it felt a bit like a wolf in sheep's clothing, a culinary Trojan horse designed to lure my unsuspecting husband into a trap. But Brian, bless his oblivious heart, didn't suspect a thing. He walked in, saw the flickering candles, the rose petals scattered on the table, my carefully orchestrated smile, and his face lit up like a Christmas tree. The coldness, the distance of the past few days, melted away instantly. He lapped up the attention, the sudden return to normalcy like a thirsty dog at a water bowl. So easily manipulated, so pathetically predictable. Had I really been this blind? He devoured the hastily prepared steak, washed down with copious amounts of red wine, laced, of course, with a generous dose of crushed sleeping pills. A little something to ensure he slept soundly through the night, undisturbed by any unexpected revelations. He was snoring softly within minutes of hitting the sheets. Mission accomplished. No elaborate seduction required. Apparently, a flickering candle and a slightly less frosty demeanor were enough to convince him he was still in control, still the master manipulator. Pathetic. I picked up his phone. Unlock. Thank you, modern technology, for fingerprint recognition. Apparently, he was as predictable with his phone. Security as he was with everything else. Same thumbprint lock as our apartment door. Consistency, I suppose. Or just plain laziness. Following the online tutorials, I bypassed his messaging apps, heading straight for the digital goldmine, Alipay. The internet, bless its anonymous heart, did not lie. Transaction history scrolled before my eyes, a damning digital trail of deceit. 520 renminbi here, 1,314 renminbi there, a lavish 5,201.314 renminbi splurge. Each transaction timestamped, each amount a saccharine declaration of affection? Lust? Whatever twisted emotion fueled their clandestine rendezvous. I screen recorded everything, methodically capturing each digital breadcrumb. Yes, screen record. Jasper's lawyerly voice echoed in my head. Document everything. Voice recordings, screenshots, everything. Preserve the chain of evidence. Authenticity, legality, relevance. Then came the larger transactions. The real financial gut punches. 70,000 renminbi. College buddy needs down payment for a house, Raven. Almost homeless, newlywed, baby on the way. Can't leave a brother hanging. 80,000 renminbi. My cousin from the village, Raven, big wedding. Bride's family, demanding a huge dowry, 388,000 renminbi. Culture, you know. Gotta help family. 150,000 renminbi. Best friend's mom, Raven, cancer. Needs emergency surgery. Life or death situation. We gotta step up. Apparently, the house-hunting college buddy, the wedding-bound cousin, and the cancer-stricken mother were all figments of Brian's fertile imagination, elaborate characters in his ongoing financial drama. From May of last year to October of this year, I scrolled, recorded, documented. Transaction after transaction, each one afresh. Stab of betrayal. Each saccharine baby, honey, sweetheart in the accompanying notes a nauseating reminder of his duplicity. A man of his age, spewing such cloying, childish endearments. Didn't he have any self-respect? Didn't he fear the digital chickens of his Alipay forest shaming him into digital exile? Ugh, disgusting. A notification popped up on my phone. Jasper. His profile picture, still the same goofy Garfield cartoon I'd chosen for him years ago. A pang of something, nostalgia? Bittersweet recognition? Flickered within me. This whole situation, partnering with my ex to expose my current husband's infidelity, felt surreal, bizarrely theatrical. Like something out of a trashy soap opera. Raven Lotus and West Jasper, partners in revenge. I shook my head, forcing myself back to reality. He wasn't West Jasper. He was Jasper Sterling, attorney at law. And I was Raven, scorned wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and client. Strictly professional. That was the narrative I needed to cling to. Keep it professional, Raven. No room for romantic flashbacks or wistful what-ifs. You are not some damsel in distress seeking rescue from her knight in shining legal armor. You're a woman wronged, seeking justice. Period. I attached the long screen recording to the message and sent it. Silence. The digital equivalent of crickets chirping. Then, finally, a single question mark. Followed by a curt, two-word reply. My condolences. My condolences? What was that supposed to mean? Condolences for my failing marriage? Condolences for my naivete? Condolences for the sheer, unadulterated mess my life had become? I poured myself another glass of wine, the ruby liquid swirling in the candlelight. The dim living room, the flickering candles, the wilting roses on the table, a macabre parody of romance. Happy birthday, Raven. Brian's voice, warm, familiar, a ghost from a happier past. He was holding a bouquet of fresh roses, their crimson petals reflecting the candlelight, casting a rosy glow on my face, a mask of manufactured emotion. Raven, I will love you forever. Marry me? Brian, down on one knee, a velvet ring box open in his hand, a diamond sparkling within. Raven, this is our home now. We'll build our life here, together. We'll have children, a family, a future. His tender words, once cherished promises, now echoed in my memory like hollow lies. Then, the abrupt, jarring intrusion of reality. A loud snort, a guttural rumble, a full-blown, earth-shattering snore emanating from the bedroom. Brian, deep in his chemically induced slumber, oblivious to the charade unfolding in the living room. My gaze drifted back to his phone, to the damning Alipay records, the digital breadcrumbs of his betrayal. The saccharine messages, the phantom friends, the stolen savings. Suddenly, the fog of denial lifted. The carefully constructed illusions shattered. The truth, stark and brutal, slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. I understood now. Understood why, for days, weeks, even months, I'd been running, hiding, avoiding the inevitable confrontation. Why I'd clung to denial, to the fragile hope that it was all a misunderstanding, a terrible mistake. Because deep down, a part of me, a naive, foolish, hopelessly romantic part of me, had desperately wanted to believe in the man I thought I knew. The man with the kind eyes, the gentle demeanor, the unwavering affection. The man who had promised forever. But forever, it turned out, had a very short shelf life. And promises, like cheap wine, could turn sour overnight. I set down my wine glass, the clinking sound sharp in the quiet room. Rising from the table, I walked towards the side bedroom, the guest room, my temporary sanctuary. The truth was ugly, painful, devastating. But the truth, finally acknowledged, was also liberating. The next move, Jasper had said, was his. He would handle everything. He would orchestrate the next act in this unfolding drama. He promised me a front row seat to the spectacle. Strange, wasn't it? That after years of acrimonious silence, a messy, painful breakup, Jasper and I could now navigate this turbulent terrain. Together, allies in a shared, albeit bizarre, cause. Comrades in arms, bound by circumstance and a shared desire for justice. Almost. Friends. If only. No. No, if onlys. No dwelling on the ghosts of the past. I shook my head, banishing the wistful thoughts. Focus, Raven. Focus on the present. Focus on the future. Focus on making them pay. I arrived at Jasper's apartment, a sleek, modern high-rise overlooking the city. He explained that Aunt Vivian's rendezvous point, the place she'd mentioned on the phone, was likely apartment 1019, right here in this building. Apparently, Jasper said, a wry smile playing on his lips, when she married my father, she insisted on this apartment. Said it was her sanctuary. She got the keys, but the title transfer paperwork is still pending. He produced a hefty key ring, jingling a small arsenal of keys in his hand. My eyes widened. Talk about access. So, you're telling me? He chuckled, reading my mind. Yes, Raven. Welcome to the privileged life. Sometimes, being a rich kid has its advantages. $2 million, and I want you out of my son's life, immediately. The cliché, the dramatic pronouncements of wealthy matriarchs in bad movies, flashed through my mind. Jasper lightly flicked my forehead with his finger. Snap out of it, Raven. Let's get inside. But. Vivian, I stammered, still struggling to wrap my head around the absurdity of it all. Your stepmother. Another forehead flick. Stepmother, please. She's Vivian. Just Vivian. And for the record, he added, his tone hardening slightly, don't underestimate Vivian. She's not some gold-digging cliché. She and my father had a prenuptial agreement tighter than Fort Knox. She's not after his money. Then what is she after? I wondered aloud, confused. Power? Control? Maybe just boredom. Who knows with Vivian? Jasper shrugged, his expression unreadable. But my father isn't a fool. He's not blind. He knows Vivian. He's taken precautions. He paused, a hint of something akin to sadness in his eyes. He's already drafted a will, leaving her 2 apartments, a commercial property downtown, and $1 million annual dividend from the company. His way of ensuring her well-being, even after he's gone. Well-being? She was living the high life, pampered and indulged, and she still needed to seduce my husband? Some people, honestly. The audacity. Jasper set up his laptop, the screen flickering to life. A grainy, black and white image filled the screen. Hidden camera footage. Apartment 1019. And then, the sounds began. Familiar sounds. Unmistakable sounds. The soundtrack to my shattered marriage. Frankly, watching this performance with my ex-boyfriend in his apartment felt surreal. Disturbingly intimate. And yet, strangely, detached. Like watching a particularly tawdry reality TV show. Ooh, yes, right there, darling. Oh, that feels so good. You're so talented, baby boy. Vivian's voice, breathy and exaggerated, filled the room. Her pale, fleshy form writhed on the screen, a grotesque parody of sensuality. Talented? Please. Give me a break. Vivian, oh, Vivian. You're so tight. I can't take it anymore. Brian's voice, strained and panting, echoed Vivian's theatrical moans. Tight? Baby boy? The cringe factor was off the charts. This wasn't just infidelity. This was some bizarre, Oedipal psychodrama playing out in real time. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something, pity? Disgust? For both of them. They were pathetic, ridiculous, trapped in their own twisted little fantasy world. I glanced at Jasper. His expression remained impassive, professional. A lawyer, unflappable, unfazed. He'd probably seen far worse in his line of work. This was probably tame compared to some of the depravity he'd witnessed. Vivian, Brian's voice, suddenly clearer, sharper, cut through the. When are you going to get Raven to sign the divorce papers? I can't stand looking at her anymore. She's so draining. Pushy. Always demanding attention, like some spoiled princess. And in bed? Like a dead fish. Every time, 2 minutes, tops. Honestly, I'm starting to worry about premature ejaculation. My blood pressure spiked. 120 over, rage. Dead fish? Dead fish? He was the one with the sexual stamina of a goldfish. He was the one who treated intimacy like a chore. Patience, darling, patience, Vivian purred, her voice laced with a venomous sweetness. Her manicured fingers traced patterns on Brian's chest, her eyes, visible in the grainy footage, gleaming with calculation. Old man. Sterling is apparently prepping the bidding documents. Once her family's land deal goes through, and the payout hits, you'll be rolling in it. And don't forget the baby angle. You need to get her pregnant, darling. Then. Her voice dropped, becoming a conspiratorial whisper. Postpartum depression. It's all the rage these days, isn't it? Especially for those fragile, emotional types. Like your Raven. Remember how she moped around for 7 years after that breakup with her college boyfriend? She chuckled, a low, cruel sound. Exactly. Brian's voice was gleeful, energized. Cold shoulder treatment, a little gaslighting, maybe some emotional blackmail. Postpartum depression, then. Bam. Mental breakdown, maybe even a suicide attempt. Then, poof. Wife problem solved. Baby, house, car, cash, all ours. Easy peasy. Brian, energized by his own depravity, flipped Vivian over, his body obscuring her from the camera. Their sickening sounds resumed, but I barely registered them. My mind was reeling, a chaotic storm of disbelief and horror. This wasn't just cheating. This wasn't just a tawdry affair. This was calculated, premeditated, monstrous. This was pure, unadulterated evil. They weren't just driven by lust or fleeting attraction. They were meticulously plotting to dismantle my life, my happiness, my very being. My marriage, my emotions, my finances, my future children, all pawns in their twisted game. And they had even weaponized cold shoulder treatment, gaslighting, emotional blackmail, the very tactics I had been instinctively recoiling from, the subtle, insidious forms of abuse I had barely even registered as abuse. The ugliness of human nature, the depths of depravity, laid bare before me. He wasn't just unfaithful. He was a predator, a parasite, a monster in human skin. All those years of fabricated affection, the endless displays of understanding and support, the carefully constructed facade of a loving husband, it was all a meticulously crafted performance, a calculated prelude to my utter destruction. A hand, warm and firm, closed over my clenched fist. Jasper's hand. A silent offering of comfort, of solidarity. My body trembled, a full-body shiver of revulsion and terror. My blood felt like ice. What if I hadn't overheard their conversation? What if I hadn't stumbled upon their vile little secret? What would my life have become? What would have been the fate of my unborn child, conceived in a marriage built on lies, destined to be raised by a monster and his accomplice? But then, a flicker of defiance sparked within me, igniting a slow burn of righteous anger. Not if I have anything to say about it. The ice in my veins began to thaw, replaced by a surge of adrenaline, a cold, clear resolve. Fear receded, replaced by a fierce, unwavering determination. I would not be a victim. I would not be broken. I would not let them win. I would make them pay. I would make them suffer. I would make them regret ever crossing Raven's path. That's more like it. That's the Raven Lotus I remember. The Tyrannosaurus Rex Raven Lotus, Jasper quipped, a hint of relief in his voice as he saw my resolve solidify. I rolled my eyes. Childhood nicknames were hardly appropriate for a serious revenge plot. Don't dredge up ancient history, Jasper. It's embarrassing. Yes, back in elementary school, when some older kids tried to shake down the younger ones for protection money near my house, I'd grabbed a kitchen cleaver and chased them down 3 blocks. From then on, I'd become their personal nemesis, patrolling the neighborhood, making sure no one dared to prey on the younger students. Jasper, ever the dramatic one, had bestowed upon me the moniker of Tyrannosaurus Rex. But Raven, Jasper's voice softened, a flicker of something akin to pain in his eyes. 7 years ago. His gaze drifted away, a shadow falling over his features. I quickly checked my phone, illuminating the screen. Goodness, look at the time. It's getting late. I really should get going. I needed to deflect, to shut down that path of conversation before it even began. 7 years was a chasm, a landscape of unspoken hurts and unanswered questions. I wasn't ready to revisit that territory. Jasper paused, a sigh escaping his lips, a sound that hinted at both resignation and lingering sadness. Then, he reached for his suit jacket. Let me drive you home. The cool night air rushed in through the open car window, carrying the scent of approaching autumn. It was a familiar chill, a ghostly echo of that long-ago autumn when he had walked away, when everything between us had fractured and fallen apart. Back then, on the cusp of graduation, our once carefree, bubblegum-sweet romance had hit a wall. The idyllic, happily ever after we'd envisioned was now overshadowed by the looming question of our futures, graduate studies abroad versus immediate employment and marriage. Jasper had been unequivocally in favor of the latter. Marry right after graduation, he'd insisted. He'd have a job lined up for me, a comfortable life all planned out. Prince and princess, happily ever after, no financial worries, no struggles. Jasper's father was a successful real estate developer, a man of considerable wealth. Jasper was, in every sense of the word, a prince. He had the resources, the connections, the confidence to make such pronouncements. And I was just Raven Lotus, a girl from a small town, from a perfectly ordinary family. Perhaps it was a manifestation of low self-esteem, the insidious insecurity that sometimes creeps into the deepest corners of even the strongest hearts, but the more I loved Jasper, the more I yearned to be more better, more accomplished. I wanted to stand beside him, not just as his wife, a decorative accessory to his already privileged life, but as an equal, a partner worthy of his stature. So, I'd secretly applied for, and miraculously received, a coveted scholarship for postgraduate studies abroad. Bursting with pride, eager to share my triumph, I'd rushed to tell Jasper, anticipating his excitement, his shared joy. Instead, my news became the catalyst, the spark that ignited the explosive argument that ultimately tore us apart. That day, words flew like daggers. He couldn't comprehend why I felt the need to leave, to pursue further education in a foreign country. I couldn't understand why he wouldn't support my ambitions, why he seemed unwilling to grow alongside me, to embrace my dreams as his own. With the passage of time, the youthful naivete faded, replaced by a clearer, albeit bittersweet, understanding. That passionate, impulsive, all-consuming teenage love had been just that, a youthful dream, beautiful and fleeting, ultimately unsustainable. After our breakup, I'd thrown myself into my studies, burying myself in textbooks and lectures, using every waking moment to try and erase him from my memory, to cauterize the wound he'd left behind. Upon returning home, armed with a prestigious degree and a fierce determination to succeed, I landed a coveted position at one of the city's largest corporations. A fresh start. A clean slate. And then I met Brian. Brian. He was a mirror image of the Jasper of my memories. The same melancholic gaze, the same faint, barely visible scar above his left eyebrow. It was foolish, reckless. Perhaps even a little pathetic, but I fell, and I fell hard. Irresistibly drawn to the familiar contours of a past love, seeking solace in the echo of a lost dream. And Brian, seemingly a gift from some cruel, cosmic trickster, played the part to perfection. He mirrored Jasper, yes, but amplified the good parts, the idealized aspects I'd clung to in my memory. He was relentlessly attentive, showering me with affection, offering an endless stream of validation, a bottomless well of seemingly unconditional love. Immediate apologies after even the smallest disagreement. Late-night cravings fulfilled with midnight runs for takeout. Early morning surprises of steaming soup dumplings delivered to my doorstep. Daily chauffeured commutes to and from work. Gifts and red envelopes for every holiday, big or small. Hot water bottles and ginger tea on those days of the month. He was the epitome of the perfect boyfriend, the perfect fiancé, the perfect husband. Patient, attentive, utterly devoted. Now, of course, the charade was exposed. The unconditional love revealed for what it was, a calculated manipulation, a carefully crafted trap. And with that realization, the last vestiges of guilt, the faint whispers of self-doubt, vanished completely. He had played me for a fool. Now it was my turn to play him. So, Jasper's voice broke through my reverie, pulling me back to the present. What's the plan now, Raven? Simple, I replied, a cold smile playing on my lips. We give him exactly what he wants. Let him believe he's winning. Let him walk willingly into the jaws of the trap. Brian, darling Brian, you've gazed into the abyss for far too long. Didn't you realize the abyss gazes also into you? That evening, back in our apartment, Brian emerged from the kitchen, bearing a steaming mug of ginger and brown sugar tea. A peace offering, a gesture of reconciliation, a pathetic attempt to smooth things over after our earlier misunderstanding. As he leaned in, his face hovering close to mine, his breath warm on my neck, a wave of revulsion washed over me. My hand, clutching the mug, convulsed. The scalding tea splashed outward, a brown torrent erupting from the rim, directly into Brian's face. Oh. Oh my God, Brian. I'm so sorry. I exclaimed, feigning panic, grabbing a handful of tissues, dabbing frantically at his face. He blinked, stunned, amber liquid dripping from his hair, tracing streaks down his face, staining the white cotton of his t-shirt. A t-shirt, I noted with a mental sneer, that I certainly hadn't bought him. Probably another gift from Aunt Vivian. A wave of nausea twisted in my stomach. Ugh, disgusting. Serves him right. But on the surface, I projected a mask of contrite distress, my voice trembling with feigned remorse. Honey, are you burned? Is it too hot? I didn't mean to, I swear, it was an accident. Tears, expertly manufactured, welled up in my eyes. He forced a weak smile, reaching out to pat my cheek, his touch sending a shiver of disgust down my spine. It's okay, silly goose. Don't worry about it. You go relax in bed, watch something on your phone. I'll clean up. Gonna hop in the shower anyway. I nodded meekly, playing the role of the fragile, easily flustered wife to perfection. Silly goose, indeed. He truly saw me as a complete imbecile, didn't he? Pathetic. As he retreated to the bathroom, the sound of the shower roaring to life, I slipped off my shoes, padding silently, barefoot, into his study. His briefcase, usually meticulously organized, lay slightly ajar on his desk. With nimble fingers, I unzipped it further, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Inside, nestled amongst documents and papers, I carefully placed the tiny, state-of-the-art listening device Jasper had provided. A miniature microphone, barely larger than a coin, with incredible range and crystal-clear audio capture. High-level predators often disguise themselves as prey, I thought, a grim satisfaction blossoming within me. Lesson 1, Brian, darling. Class is now in session. Later, as Brian emerged from the bathroom, freshly showered and radiating a disconcerting level of amorous enthusiasm, wrapping his arms around me, attempting to initiate some post-shower intimacy, I shoved a piece of paper into his chest. My modified medical report. Brian, I said, my voice trembling, my eyes wide with feigned fear. I'm scared. Brian's amorous advances faltered. A flicker of apprehension crossed his face. He knew, deep down, what he'd been up to. The guilt, or perhaps just the fear of exposure, was palpable. The doctor says, I continued, my voice barely above a whisper, I have a gynecological infection. I need to take medication. Relief washed over his face, a wave so palpable it was almost comical. He actually sagged with relief. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry to hear that, he said, his tone suddenly solicitous, dripping with false concern. But hey, we'll get you all fixed up, baby. Just gotta follow doctor's orders. And, well, no, lovey-dovey time for a while. But, don't worry, honey, your hubby will be thinking of you. Missing you. Like crazy. Missing me? Really? Because he seemed suspiciously happy. Was it the confirmation that he was in the clear? Or just the blessed reprieve from conjugal duties? Either way, his relief was radiating off him in waves. Hold your horses, Brian, darling, I thought, a wicked smile playing on my lips, though he couldn't see it. The show's just getting started. And there's more good news where that came from. Oh, and there's something else, I added, my voice still soft, still trembling. My Uncle Leo, he's been talking about his son, my cousin, the one who wants to open a spa? A hot springs resort? Brian's ears perked up. His eyes, previously glazed with manufactured sympathy, sharpened with sudden interest. Money. Always money. He's short on cash, I continued, carefully watching Brian's reaction. Apparently, he's thinking about selling the old family house. The one in the countryside? Bingo. Brian's eyes lit up, practically glowing in the dim light of the bedroom. He asked me to see if maybe we'd be interested in buying it, I said, feigning casualness, as if the idea had just occurred to me. It's not that expensive, he says. And with our savings, we could probably swing it. Plus, family discount, and all that. And it would really help him out of a tight spot. I paused, letting the bait dangle. What do you think, honey? Should we consider it? I could practically hear the mental calculations whirring in his brain. Rural property. Cheap land. Potential for development. Resale value. His heart rate, I was sure, had just tripled. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close, showering my face with enthusiastic kisses. Buy it. Absolutely buy it, Raven. Brilliant idea, honey. You're so smart. We'll get it done. First thing tomorrow, I'll start figuring out the financing. The next afternoon, true to his word, Brian transferred the agreed-upon sum into my bank account. And sent a saccharine WeChat message to boot. Gushing about how he was so happy to help family, and whenever my uncle was ready, we could finalize the property transfer, no rush at all. Mr. Perfect son-in-law, always playing the role to the hilt. Our relatives, every single one of them, adored Brian. Spoke of him with reverence, with a touch of envy. Such a devoted husband. So good to Raven's family. Was that part of his plan all along? To cultivate a perfect public image, to build a fortress of goodwill and admiration around himself, so that when the inevitable cold shoulder treatment, the gaslighting, the emotional dismantling began, I would be isolated, alone, disbelieved? I stared at the notification on my phone, the confirmation of the $30,000 transfer. A cold smile touched my lips. Jasper, I typed, sending a message to my unlikely partner in crime. Money's in the account. Jasper's reply was immediate. A thumbs up emoji. Followed by, Phase 2, commence. I dramatically slammed a shopping receipt onto the kitchen table. A high-end department store. A designer handbag. Price tag, $2,000. Brian, what is this? My voice, carefully calibrated, vibrated with righteous fury. Who did you buy this for? $2,000 for a handbag? Are you keeping another woman on the side? His eyes widened, pupils dilating in theatrical shock. His face paled, then flushed crimson, then paled again, a chameleon display of manufactured guilt. His lips twitched, his jaw muscles clenched. He was a terrible actor. Brian. I loved you. I trusted you implicitly. And you dare to, too. I clapped a hand over my mouth, feigning a sob, the other hand trembling dramatically, pointing an accusatory finger in his direction. Tears, on cue, welled up in my eyes. How could you? Come on, Brian, spit it out. Lie, you pathetic excuse for a human being. I'm waiting. Finally, he stammered, his voice a strangled whisper. Raven, honey, listen to me. It's not what you think. It's for Vivian. Vivian? Oh, you're really going with that? Impressive. 2 sentences in, and his composure seemed to solidify. His voice gained strength, his eyes met mine with a semblance of wounded innocence. Raven, baby, remember how I told you Vivian was instrumental in getting my project approved? She really went to bat for me, honey. And? Well, her birthday's tomorrow. I just thought, a little something, a thank you gift, you know? To show my appreciation. He even managed a pathetic little chuckle, a sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. You know, honey, gotta play the long game, right? You scratch my back, I scratch yours. We treat Vivian right, she'll keep opening doors for us. It's networking, baby. Smart business. Oh, Brian, I breathed, my voice thick with faux emotion, my lower lip trembling dramatically. Why didn't you just say so? You scared me half to death. I thought I was losing you. Oh, Brian, honey, gag me with a spoon. But Brian, bless his narcissistic heart, ate it up with a spoon. He pulled me into his arms, nuzzling my hair, murmuring reassurances, basking in the glow of his own perceived cleverness, his masterful manipulation. Just a handbag? I asked, feigning a return to a more rational state, my voice still laced with a hint of lingering doubt. Is that really enough to show our gratitude? Maybe we should do something more? To really show Vivian how much we appreciate her? A truly brilliant idea blossomed in my mind, a final, theatrical flourish to our carefully crafted performance. Like, what? Brian asked, his eyes narrowing slightly, a flicker of suspicion finally, belatedly, sparking within him. Why don't we invite Vivian over? To our place? We could cook her a special birthday dinner. A home-cooked meal, you know? From the heart. Wouldn't that be more meaningful? I widened my eyes, batting my eyelashes, radiating an aura of innocent sincerity. Well, Brian hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. But the lure of appearing generous, the desire to maintain the charade of innocent gratitude, ultimately outweighed his apprehension. He nodded slowly, reluctantly. Yeah, I guess. I guess that would be nice. A nice gesture. Perfect. I clapped my hands together, my smile widening, feeling a surge of adrenaline, the thrill of the final act approaching. I'll invite Vivian over for dinner. A birthday celebration, courtesy of the happy couple. Later that night, as Brian snored beside me, his breathing a rhythmic, oblivious drone, I picked up his phone, unlocked it with his conveniently predictable thumbprint, and composed a text message. Destination, Sterling Sr. I am your wife's other man. It's her birthday tomorrow. Please join us for a little get-together. The reply came almost instantly. A single word. Fine. Jasper had been right. Mr. Sterling Sr., the stoic patriarch, needed to see it to believe it. Needed irrefutable, visual proof of his wife's betrayal. And tomorrow night, he would get it. served up on a silver platter, with a side of birthday cake and a generous helping of marital infidelity. The next day, I was up before dawn, meticulously cleaning the apartment, banishing every speck of dust, filling the air with the subtly calming scent of sandalwood incense. Setting the stage for the final scene. 6 p.m. sharp. The doorbell chimed. I arranged the place settings, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Brian stood on the threshold, a forced smile plastered on his face, escorting Vivian into our home. Up close, in the harsh light of our entryway, I studied her. 10-centimeter heels, perfectly coiffed hair, flawless makeup, and expensive silk dress clinging to her still svelte figure. A woman determined to defy her age, to project an image of youthful vitality. And yet, there was something familiar about her. A nagging sense of déjà vu, a whisper of recognition at the edge of my memory. Her gaze met mine. For a fleeting second, I glimpsed something in her eyes. Not just polite social pleasantries, but something darker, colder. A flash of raw, undisguised hatred. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a practiced, dazzling smile. Oh, you two are just too kind. Really, at my age, birthdays are hardly worth celebrating. Had I imagined that flicker of animosity? That brief, chilling glimpse into her true feelings? Or was it real? Was she truly harboring resentment towards me? And if so, why? Oh, dear, my memory! I exclaimed, snapping my fingers, feigning sudden realization. I ordered a birthday cake for you, Vivian. A big one. Completely slipped my mind to pick it up. Honey, I said to Brian, turning to him with a pleading look, would you mind keeping Vivian company for a bit? I'll run out and grab it. Shouldn't take more than 40 minutes, tops. I grabbed my car keys, my heart pounding, adrenaline surging. They were already practically glued together, their eyes locked in some silent, conspiratorial communication. Neither of them even registered that I hadn't fully closed the door behind me as I slipped out. I didn't go anywhere. I just stood in the stairwell, just outside our apartment door, listening, waiting. The seconds ticked by, each one an eternity. Then, finally, the telltale sounds began. Faint at first, muffled by the apartment walls, then gradually escalating in volume, in intensity. The unmistakable sounds of intimacy, of betrayal. Brian's briefcase, and the tiny microphone nestled within, were doing their job. I texted Jasper. The mice are in the trap. Time to call pest control. 2 minutes later, the elevator dinged. Footsteps in the hallway, heavy and purposeful. The sound of keys rattling in the lock, the front door swinging open. A woman's shriek, sharp and piercing. A man's grunt of pain, a muffled thud. Taking a deep breath, I picked up the cheap, generic birthday cake I'd grabbed from the corner store, and stepped back into our apartment. Showtime. Time to play my part. To perfection. I pushed past the small crowd of men, all armed with smartphones, snapping photos, documenting the unfolding drama. Ignoring them, I located Brian, half-dressed. Sprawled on the living room floor, a look of stunned disbelief on his face. And Vivian, scrambling to cover herself, her face contorted with rage and humiliation. Ignoring Vivian for the moment, I focused on Brian. My hand, fueled by weeks of suppressed anger, connected with his face, with a resounding smack. His head snapped back, his eyes widening in shock. Brian! I screamed, my voice cracking with feigned hysteria, pointing a trembling finger at him. You swore you and Vivian were just business associates. That you were just thanking her for her help. And I actually cooked for you both. Bought you a birthday cake. You disgusting, lying monster. It's over, Brian. Do you hear me? Over. Divorce. I want a divorce. Now. Vivian, recovering with remarkable speed, her initial shock giving way to a practiced victimhood, pushed past the men, launching herself at Mr. Sterling Sr., clinging to his arm, weeping theatrically. Years of practice, no doubt. Jiangua. Oh, Jiangua, you have to believe me. It's all his fault. He forced himself on me. He said it was my birthday, invited me over for dinner, and then, the moment Raven left, he attacked me. I'm just a defenseless woman. How could he do this to me? sobs, wails, the full performance. Defenseless woman? Please. And just like that, the cheating husband morphed into a rapist. Brilliant. Mr. Sterling Sr., stone-faced and grim, led the weeping, dramatically wronged Vivian out of the apartment, leaving Brian utterly defeated. Scrambling to pull on his boxer shorts, kneeling on the floor, tears streaming down his face, grabbing at my legs, begging for forgiveness. Forgiveness? From me? I laughed, a short, humorless sound. With a swift, violent gesture, I swept my arm across the coffee table, sending the newly purchased sandalwood incense holder crashing to the floor. Ceramic shards scattered across the rug, mirroring the shattered fragments of my heart, of my marriage, of my trust. Forgiveness, Brian? I spat, my voice dripping with contempt. You have the nerve to ask for forgiveness? After everything you've done? If you have any shred of decency left, any desire to avoid total public humiliation, you will do one thing, and one thing only. You will agree to a quick, clean divorce. No drama, no lawyers, no fighting over assets. Just sign the papers and get out of my life. Consider it. Damage control. He sank back onto the floor, a broken, defeated man, his face a mask of despair. The reality of his situation, the utter collapse of his carefully constructed world, finally seemed to be sinking in. In the aftermath, Brian, surprisingly, didn't beg. Didn't plead. Didn't even try to argue. The fight had gone out of him. He was strangely compliant. After the initial shock subsided, he morphed into a different kind of monster. A petty, grasping, relentlessly materialistic 1. He started itemizing our shared possessions, meticulously calculating their worth, haggling over every dime, every detail. The down payment on the apartment was from my family, he whined, his voice petulant, his eyes narrowed with avarice. The renovations, the furniture. The sudden shift, the blatant display of petty greed, disgusted me. This wasn't the man I thought I knew. This wasn't even a shadow of the Jasper I had once loved. This was something else entirely. Something far more base, far more repulsive. I had no desire to drag this out, to engage in protracted legal battles, to haggle over every last possession. Even in cases of marital infidelity. I knew the courts rarely awarded complete financial ruin to the cheating spouse, unless outright financial malfeasance could be proven. Fine, I said, my voice cold, detached. The apartment, you can keep. It was your family's down payment. We paid the mortgage together for 2 years, the appreciation. The principal, I don't want any of it. The cash in our joint account, I'll take. The car? It's mine. My premarital asset. I'll drive it away. Any objections? He seemed stunned by my sudden capitulation, my lack of resistance. He actually softened, his voice taking on a pleading tone. He tried, one last time, to convince me to stay, to work things out, to salvage our broken marriage. I grabbed my purse, stood up, and walked towards the door. Brian, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. 9 a.m. tomorrow. The Civil Affairs Bureau. Be there. Let's end this. Cleanly. Quickly. Don't force me to make this uglier than it already is. The next morning, 9 a.m., the Civil Affairs Bureau. Brian, predictably, was a no-show. But Jasper was. Surprise, he said, a wry smile playing on his lips. Brian's, indisposed. Indisposed? I stared at Jasper, confused. Vivian pressed charges, Jasper explained, his voice matter of fact. Rape. False accusation, of course, but still. Police are involved. Brian's currently assisting them with their inquiries. I blinked, dumbfounded. You didn't think Mr. Sterling Sr. would just let them off the hook, did you? A little, punishment seemed appropriate. Jasper. I exclaimed, horrified. But, we haven't even gotten divorced yet. Couldn't he have waited until after the divorce to unleash his legal hounds? In the end, Brian wasn't actually charged with rape. But he was charged with soliciting prostitution. A 15-day detention, a $50 fine. Damage, minimal. Humiliation, maximum. I was initially considering pushing for a year-long re-education program, Jasper admitted, a hint of amusement in his voice. but that seemed excessive. And frankly, I'm impatient. Impatient for what? I dared not ask. A month and a half later, divorce certificate in hand, I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, feeling lighter than air, as if a crushing weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Brian was there, waiting, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow, his once confident swagger completely evaporated. His company life, I gathered, was also in tatters. Word of his indiscretion had spread like wildfire. Office gossip, always a voracious beast. Whispers, snickers, sideways glances followed him down the hallways. 50-year-old auntie, the rumor snickered. Pimping charges. His career, his reputation, his carefully constructed image, all crumbling around him. I watched him walk away, a solitary, defeated figure, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, no lingering anger. Just indifference. Deserved, I thought, and nothing more. Raven. I turned. Sunlight, bright and blinding, illuminated the scene. Jasper stood there, tall and confident, his eyes warm, his smile gentle. Care to celebrate? I shook my head, smiling back. Thank you, but no. Not today. Just took a 2-hour lunch break. Gotta get back to work. Men might betray you, relationships might crumble, but work? Work was reliable. Work was constant. Work was safe. I channeled all my pent-up energy, my restless emotions, into my career. My boss, impressed by my renewed focus and drive, showered me with praise, promotions, and salary increases that seemed to defy gravity. Work became my refuge, my solace, my validation. Then, one day, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I answered. Hello, is this Ms. Raven Lotus? This is Officer Davies, calling from the Public Security Bureau. The voice on the other end of the line was stern, official, with a slight, vaguely southern inflection. We are investigating a case of suspected money laundering. Have you recently made any transactions in Hong Kong, Ms. Lotus? I paused, a strange sense of déjà vu prickling my skin. That voice, that tone, that carefully crafted air of official authority, it tugged at a buried memory, a half-forgotten fear. The familiar cadence, the carefully chosen words, transported me back, across 7 years, to another time of confusion, of fear, of devastating heartbreak. After our explosive argument, after Jasper had walked away, he had vanished. Radio silence. No calls, no texts, no emails. Nothing. And I, stubborn and wounded, had refused to reach out, had bitten down hard on my pride, and thrown myself headfirst into my academic pursuits, into my escape plan. Before leaving for overseas, I'd sent him one last text message, a final, desperate plea. But no reply. At the airport, luggage in tow, I'd stood by the gate, waiting, hoping, until the final boarding call echoed through the terminal. Still, no sign of him. And then, alone, adrift, I'd flown across the ocean, leaving everything, everyone, behind. That initial period, the weeks, the months of silence, had been agonizing. The first real, prolonged separation we'd ever endured. The first time I'd truly confronted the possibility of a life without him. In the lonely hours of the night, when his day was just dawning, the ache of his absence was almost unbearable. I'd find myself reaching for my phone, fingers hovering over his number, desperate to break the silence, to hear his voice. But then, the phone had rung. Not him. The Public Security Bureau. Ms. Raven Lotus, this is Officer Davies, Public Security Bureau. We have reason to believe you are involved in a smuggling operation. We are conducting an investigation. Your phone is now under surveillance. Your contacts are being monitored. Do not contact anyone. Any attempt to do so will be construed as obstruction of justice, and your contacts will also become persons of interest in our investigation. Panic seized me, cold and suffocating. The voice on the phone rattled off details, specifics that seemed impossibly accurate. The delivery address of a package I'd received just yesterday. My personal information, my passport number. My student ID. Then came the demand. Transfer all funds from your bank account into a designated government account. The funds will be frozen, pending investigation. Once you are cleared, the funds will be returned in full. Terror propelled me into action. I was young, naive, utterly unprepared for such a sophisticated scam. I followed their instructions blindly, terrified of implicating anyone else, desperate to cooperate, to clear my name. I transferred every penny in my account, $10,000. My entire life savings. My entire semester's living expenses. My family, ordinary working-class people, had scraped together every yuan to send me abroad. Even now, 7 years later, they were not wealthy, no. Sudden windfall of money had magically transformed our fortunes. Burden them with this, to add to their already immense sacrifices, was unthinkable. For a month, I lived in a state of near-constant anxiety, isolated, terrified, teetering on the brink of a complete mental breakdown. I shut off my phone, severed all contact with the outside world, paralyzed by fear, convinced I was about to be arrested, deported, imprisoned. Then, one day, a chance conversation with my roommate, a Chinese-American girl, shattered the illusion. She too had received a similar phone call, a similar threat, a similar demand for money. As she recounted her experience, the pieces clicked into place. The chilling realization dawned. It was a scam. A sophisticated, targeted, utterly devastating scam, specifically designed to prey on vulnerable international students. Relief, sharp and overwhelming, washed over me. I hung up on my roommate, abruptly, rudely, and for the first time in weeks, turned my phone back on. And there it was. A voicemail. From Jasper. A message of finality, of heartbreaking farewell. Raven, his voice, cold, distant, utterly unlike the warm, loving voice I knew. I've been dealing with some family matters recently. Things are complicated. We need to take a break. I'll be in touch, eventually. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Silence. Then, a series of short, cryptic texts. Raven, have you really left? Raven, did you ever even love me? Raven, I'm hurting so much. Raven, I'm getting married. Consider this goodbye. Please, don't contact me again. I wish you well in your studies. Goodbye, Raven. The last message, the final nail in the coffin, had arrived 10 days after the first voicemail. 10 days of agonizing silence, of mounting fear, of crushing loneliness. 10 days before I'd finally pieced together the scam, before I dared to turn my phone back on. I'd stood there, frozen, the phone clutched in my trembling hand, the words echoing in my mind. Getting married. Goodbye. For what felt like an eternity, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then, slowly, mechanically, I raised my hand, my finger hovering over his number. The number I'd dialed 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. But this time, my finger froze. Unmoving. Unable to press call. Was it my fault? My ambition? My pursuit of dreams that didn't align with his? Was it his fault? His inability to understand, to support, to wait? Or was it just fate? Cruel, capricious, indifferent fate that had orchestrated this devastating misunderstanding, this tragic, 7-year separation? Ms. Lotus? Jasper's voice, crisp and clear, pulled me back to the present. Care to join me for dinner? To celebrate your newfound freedom? That voice. That familiar, yet somehow different voice. A voice from the past, resurrected in the present. I blinked, focusing on him. Jasper stood in the doorway of my office, tall, lean, impeccably dressed, leaning against the frame, a hint of a smile playing on his lips, his eyes twinkling with amusement, with something more. My gaze drifted to his hands. Long, elegant fingers, the knuckles prominent, undeniably familiar. And bare. No wedding ring. That message, 7 years ago, getting married. Are you just going to stand there admiring my bouquet all day? Jasper teased, extending a hand, laden with a massive bouquet of vibrant red roses. Or are you going to take these, before my arm gives out? The roses tumbled into my arms, their velvety petals brushing against my skin, their intoxicating fragrance filling the air. The office erupted in cheers, whistles, playful catcalls from my colleagues. Flustered, blushing, I grabbed Jasper's hand, and practically dragged him out of the office, escaping the sudden spotlight, seeking refuge in the anonymity of the bustling city streets. "What are you doing, Jasper?" I stammered, breathless, clutching the roses tightly, settling into the passenger seat of his car. He glanced at me, a playful smirk on his face. "Courting you, Raven. What else would it be?" He feigned an expression of utter bewilderment, as if the answer was so blindingly obvious it was idiotic to even ask. But, 7 years. 7 years had passed. A lifetime. And I had already weathered one failed marriage. Was it even possible? Could we rewind the clock? Erase the years of pain, of misunderstanding, of lost time? A sudden ache resonated in my chest, a pang of vulnerability, of lingering pain. My eyes welled up, unbidden tears threatening to spill. And then, a gentle touch, a soft pressure on my forehead. A kiss. Tender, fleeting, comforting. "Raven," he murmured, his voice low, husky, his gaze searching mine. "Give me another chance. Please? Just one more chance." "But, 7 years ago," I whispered, the words catching in my throat, the weight of the past pressing down on me. Warmth enveloped me, a familiar, comforting embrace. I was pulled into his arms, held close, enveloped in his familiar scent, the scent of home, of memory, of something enduring. "7 years ago," he murmured, his voice muffled against my hair, a hint of playful accusation in his tone. "7 years ago, you walked away from me, Raven Lotus." He pulled back slightly, looking down at me, his eyes soft, pleading. But you said you were getting married," I protested, confusion clouding my mind. "You told me not to contact you again." He leaned back slightly, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. Then, he reached for his phone, unlocking it, tapping at the screen. "Voice message, remember? Let's take a listen." He held the phone out to me, pressing play. His voice, cold, distant, formal, filled the car. The message of farewell, the heartbreaking goodbye. Then, abruptly, the recording ended. And then, another voice. A woman's voice. Faint, but distinct, whispering at the end of the message, barely audible. "Don't worry, darling. She's gone. He's all yours now." Jasper's eyes met mine, his gaze intense, searching. "That last part, Raven. That wasn't me." 2 days later, Jasper brought someone to meet me. "Vivian?" I stared at Jasper, bewildered. He just winked, a silent promise of explanation. The woman before me was a pale imitation of the glamorous, high-heeled socialite I'd encountered at our apartment. No makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes plain, unremarkable. She looked older, worn down, defeated. "If I tell you everything," she said, her voice flat, weary, "will you leave me alone? Will you stop, whatever this is?" Jasper nodded, his expression unyielding. "I did it," she confessed, her gaze fixed on the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did it to prove I wasn't just some gold digger. To prove I was different from the other women. That's why I insisted on the prenuptial agreement. I knew your father wouldn't leave me destitute. The house, the car, the dividends. It was enough. But, it wasn't really about the money, was it?" She looked up then, her eyes meeting mine, a flicker of something like resentment, something like envy, in their depths. "When I found out you two had broken up, after that fight, after you left, I saw my chance. If my daughter married Jasper, then the sterling fortune, the whole empire. It would all be in our family. Blood is thicker than water, right? Keep it in the family, that's what they say." A bitter, humorless laugh escaped her lips. She seemed to almost relish the twisted logic of her own scheme. "Fate was on my side," she continued, her voice growing stronger, her eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity. "Your father got sick. Hospitalized." Jasper was consumed. Running between the hospital and the office, exhausted, stressed. He'd fall asleep right there in the hospital room, by his father's bedside. And that's when I took his phone. Sent you that voicemail. The one that broke you both. The one that made you give up." She smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "I thought I'd finally won. I was actually happy. For a while. But my daughter, she's useless. After all that effort, all that planning, she still couldn't reel him in. Couldn't make him fall in love with her. A flash of maternal disappointment, a flicker of resentment towards her own child, crossed her face. And then, you came back. And everything started to unravel. To keep you and Jasper apart, to make sure you didn't rekindle things, I set you up with Brian. He was pliable, easily manipulated. And I knew he was the kind of man who would always be chasing younger, prettier women. He would keep you distracted. Keep you occupied. And you, well, you were always so vulnerable. So easily swayed by a bit of attention, a bit of flattery. So, she concluded, spreading her hands wide, her expression a mixture of defiance and resignation. That's it. The whole sordid story. Anything else you want to know? She seemed utterly unrepentant, devoid of remorse, still clinging to the delusion that her machinations were justified, even brilliant. We dismissed Vivian, leaving her to stew in her own twisted logic, her own self-inflicted misery. As she walked away, Jasper sent a text message to Brian. Vivian's contact information and address. Consider it a belated wedding gift. You said you'd let her go, I protested, surprised. You promised. I promised, Jasper corrected, a sly grin spreading across his face. But I never said anything about her other acquaintances. Let's just say, Brian has a few unanswered questions for Vivian. And I have a feeling he's going to be very persuasive in getting those questions answered. I shuddered inwardly. Poor Vivian. Perhaps getting entangled with the legal system was preferable to facing the wrath of a betrayed, humiliated, and thoroughly enraged Brian. Definitely not wise to cross a lawyer. Raven, Jasper's voice, soft, gentle, broke through my thoughts. Let's leave the past where it belongs. In the past. Okay? Every day from this moment forward. That's what truly matters. That's where our happiness lies. We have so many more 7 years, Raven. So many more years to spend together. If you'll let me. His gaze, warm and earnest, held mine captive. I buried my face in his chest, inhaling his familiar scent, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, feeling the warmth of his embrace, the solidity of his presence. Something inside me, something frozen, something broken, began to thaw, to melt, to heal. And something new, something fragile, something hopeful, began to grow. A year later, we stood beneath a clear blue sky, surrounded by blooming flowers and the gentle murmur of loved ones. Our wedding day. The lawn wedding we'd dreamed of, planned for, envisioned all those years ago, finally a reality. The sunlight streamed down, bathing the white lace of my dress in a soft, ethereal glow. The breeze whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of roses and honeysuckle. Yes. From this day forward, every moment, every breath, every shared smile, would be cherished. Every day would be a celebration. A testament to resilience, to forgiveness, to second chances. A promise of forever. May all those who love find their way to each other, may love conquer all, may time be kind, may every encounter be a blessing.